you want to get to a situation where you and the client have sat down, you've agreed on a tracking platform. This is what we're going to use to track it. You'll find that the client will always trust their own internal reports above all else, which is fine. And generally speaking, whatever tracking platform you go with, if you can get it to within like a 20% discrepancy of what the client's internal reports are showing, that's going to be pretty good, as long as the trends mirror one another. If their bookings are going up, then if you're using conversion tracking, you should hope to see the same thing. So number one, agree on what's the kind of tracking platform we're going to use. What are the KPIs across all of the product categories that you're going to use to measure performance? What's the cost per acquisition that I need to be achieving? And all of that conversation, you as far as possible, try to have it up front, try to get it sorted out. In reality, you're going to constantly be battling tracking issues. I see it all the time. But yeah, just try to be singing off the same hymn sheet, working off the same tracking solution. And as long as the general trends mirror the internal reports and it's within a decent discrepancy, then that's a pretty good job. When it comes to a website, generally speaking, there's any number of things you can measure. There tends to be, macro goals, which would be basically e-commerce. What's the revenue value of the products that we're selling? But beyond those macro goals, there are many, many micro goals on a client's website that you may decide you want to track. And that could be a download of a newsletter. It could be playing a video. It could be looking at product descriptions. There's a whole host of things you can track. And, most analytics specialists and website usability gurus will argue that, if you're only doing one thing on your website, if it's only lead generation, then you're not making good use of your website. And I think, that's a reasonable argument to make. You should track everything, all of those micro goals. You should look at keeping a record of how you're performing in terms of driving downloads, for example. But where you choose to track it is very important. And in my experience, and I think for most of you guys, the tracking solution you're going to rely on is conversion tracking. In my experience with conversion tracking, I personally think you're almost better off just measuring that goal, which actually has a monetary value, which is actually important to the client. You can put the conversion tracking code across all of your macro and micro goals, and it becomes very confusing when you're optimizing. So I generally would recommend conversion tracking. Conversions you're going to see in the AdWords interface. Let it just be the meaningful ones, the ones that actually matter, and that's going to make your ability to actually optimize towards the thing that actually drives value much, much easier. All of the micro goals, if you're using Google Analytics, you can really effectively measure the micro goals using that particular platform. So in this session, what I'm planning to take you through is, number one, conversion tracking. Probably the simplest tracking solution that you can implement. And in my view, it's one of the most powerful and effective from your perspective, because all of the data gets pulled into the AdWords interface where you actually take action on the account. I've been in situations when I started at Google where clients were sending me over Excel sheets from Marin or Kenshu with all of their data as to what keywords have converted. And it's an absolute nightmare, because you're sitting there at your computer with a spreadsheet going, there's a keyword for hotels in Paris, it's converted, it's a good CPA, right, I should put the bids up. And you're trying to marry two separate data sets and take action on it. Conversion tracking, it's all just there. It's in the interface. Becomes very easy to actually understand the impact of your decisions right there in one platform, whether that's increasing your bids or whatever it might be. We're going to talk a little bit about understanding KPIs, really actually trying to get to the bottom of it, because clients will often try to hoodwink you. They'll tell you their CPA is way, way lower than it actually could be. So the only way for you to work off a level playing field and to really understand, am I doing a good job, is to probe the client, to understand their industry, and actually understand at a product level what's that target CPA. I think the other really important thing about understanding KPIs, it really will determine what products you pitch to a client. It'll determine even possibly what industries and what types of clients you go after, because the reality is Adwords lends itself a lot better to products that have higher margins. And if you're playing in an industry that has really, really low margins, then very often it automatically rules out certain products, and it's not going to work for the client. Then I'm going to deviate a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the Higgs Boson particle. Does everyone know what that is? That's like the God particle, guys. That's scientists have been looking for this particle for like 40 years. It explains where we came from, the origins of the universe. So I'm going to chat a little bit about that. And then I'll take you through how to set up goals in e-commerce. So we'll move on to the actual analytics platform, which is a bit more advanced. And then I'm going to take you through some competitive insights, how I use analytics for my pitches, and give you like 4 concrete examples of how, when you get all this tracking in place, how can you actually use it. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm going to run through this super quick because there's plenty of help center articles on how to set up conversion tracking. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't know how to do it? Okay, so it doesn't really seem like we need to go through it. Cool. You just go to, there's a section, as I said, you'll see an article in the help center, but there's a section in the AdWords account called conversions. You click on conversions. It takes you through to, the conversion tracking page. You can either click on the new conversion button, or you can import your goals from analytics. If you click on the new conversion button, there's a 3-step flow to generating the small snippet of code that goes on the particular page that represents a conversion. It'll typically be a thank you for booking page, or a thank you for submitting your information page, or whatever that might be. You basically put this snippet of code between the body tags on the HTML page of that particular page. And anytime a user actually buys a product and is taken to the thank you for purchasing page, that code fires. And it registers in AdWords that that person came to the website via this particular ad or this particular keyword, and they ended up ultimately booking. It's last click attribution. So we're looking at a 30-day window in terms of the cookie, and we assign the conversion value to the last clicked on ad or the last search for keyword, which is quite important to understand. Yeah.
In the conversion tracking, you can't delete your conversions. You delete it, but it still stays there. Is there any way that you can clean it out?
Yeah, can we chat afterwards?
Sure.
Cool. I think you can delete them. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll chat afterwards on it. Okay. So you just basically follow the 3-step process. It's very, very intuitive. As I said, there's a help center article for how to do it. I'm not going to dwell on the ins and outs of it, but essentially, in the final step, it generates the code, which you can either email to your developer, or if you do that kind of thing yourself, you just copy and paste it and put it on the relevant pages of your site. The other option that I mentioned is you can import your goals from Google Analytics. So if you select that option, it'll automatically pull up all of your goals in Analytics if the 2 accounts are linked, and you can tick what goals you want to pull in and click on import. The reason you might want to do that, some advertisers aren't keen to put lots of snippets of code on their site because it might slow the site down. And it's also convenient. If you've already got analytics set up and there's good goals in there, it can be just as easy to import the goals. I'm going to talk a little bit now about understanding KPIs. I touched on this in my last session very briefly, but advertisers basically look at the CPAs, their target CPA, from the perspective of their gross margins. And a gross margin in any business is essentially the revenue that the sale of the product generates minus the cost of goods sold. And that's basically going to be your profit margin. Where Adwords fits in is essentially on the cost of goods sold side. It's a variable cost, and understanding that and the impact that Adwords has on your margins is really important. So let me just talk through 3 examples very quickly. I used to work in the hotel or the travel vertical in the UK team, and we used to manage hotel aggregators. If you imagine, if a hotel aggregator is selling a luxury hotel, some of the questions that you guys might want to really start to ask them to probe to find out what their CPA, it might be something like, okay, what's the average booking value in Paris for a hotel? If the average booking value in Paris is $500, and you know that the average duration of stay is typically 3 nights, then the revenue that particular aggregator is going to generate in Paris is $1,500. So $1,500 basically by 15%. So generally aggregators take about 15% commission on the value of the booking. So if we multiply 15% by 1,500, you get $225. That's what the hotel aggregator is getting paid on average for a hotel booking in Paris. So basically, if they had no variable costs whatsoever, all of that is profit margin, and anything you achieve within that is going to mean that they're profitable. Supposing you get them a CPA of $25. So basically, we can say they had revenue of $225. The advertising costs in Google were $25. Now their profit margin is $200, and that's an 88% profit margin. So you can see, as the CPA rises, you're obviously eating into their profit margins, but that's generally, that's fine until break-even point of $200. I think it's important just to talk through it because you've really got to understand the business model. How are they making money? Or you can't do your job effectively. Another quick example, in retailing, clothes retail, the margins are really, really low. They tend to be between about 8 and 13%. So again, in this example, supposing Mr. Price, their gross merchandise value is $25, the cost of goods sold might be $21. That means they're making a profit margin of $4, which is 16%. If you're getting them a CPA of $2, you can see that eats into their margins, and their margins go down to 8%. So we've had lots of examples where, and Mr. Price is one of them to tell you the truth, where their profit margins are so low that it's hard, it's difficult to make even PPC advertising profitable for them. And you have to have a whole conversation around, okay, first of all, can we bid on brand terms? Because that's going to be really effective at bringing down your CPA and actually driving conversions. And, in a situation where maybe it's difficult to drive a successful CPA, you might start having a branding conversation. You might say, well, look, why don't we start advertising on YouTube or really trying to build up your brand so that people search for your brand name, Mr. Price, on search at the expense of searching for clothes? Because ultimately that'll bring your cost down. It's much, much cheaper to bid on brand. And the last example is like the eBays of the world, where they just take a commission on the sale. So if I buy a Samsung phone on bid or buy, they get a 2% commission on the sale. So you multiply 2% by 5,000 Rand, the value of the product. Bid or buy are being paid 100 Rand for that particular product being sold, for connecting the buyer and the seller. So any CPA below 100 Rand, and they're profitable. So sorry to dwell on that kind of lesson, but I think it's important to digest it. The last thing I wanted to say is this idea of striking the right balance between profitability and volume. It's absolutely crucial. You can have really, really high profit margins, but the volume might be so low that you're not actually making much revenue, much total profit. So in the example in this slide, the advertiser, when his ad appears in position 11, his CPA is down at like $6, I can't really see it, but down at about $6, and his profit margin is at 79%. So doing awesome on profit margins and CPA. Because the volume is so low, the total profit is minuscule. It's $67. As they bid more aggressively and start driving way more volume through the account, it does cost them more money. Their CPA does rise, but because of and their margins do come down, but because of the sheer volume that they're driving through the account, their total profit is actually at its largest in position 2. And again, it's a really important concept to understand, that there's always a trade-off between volume and profitability, and you're trying to hit the sweet spot with your advertisers. But you can't do any of this analysis if you haven't set up conversion tracking, if you haven't set up e-commerce, or if you haven't set up goals and analytics. So, any questions? This isn't the most exciting, but it really is fundamental building blocks. Look, there are 2 different measurement systems. Conversion tracking only measures PPC activity. It only measures Google Adwords. Analytics measures all of your traffic sources. So, there's going to be a lot of discrepancies between the data, because in fact they measure different things and they measure them in different ways. And you really just need to dig deep into what that means and understand the 2 products from an attribution point of view, and also, I guess, understanding, the data behind it. I can't really deep dive into it with you in this session. I guess from my perspective, and I think, if you're getting started and all of this is new to you, AdWords conversion tracking is by far and away the simplest method of tracking performance. And for most small businesses like B&Bs, dentists, it's good enough. They're going to be happy with that. The problem is it's very limited. It's very AdWords centric. It's only looking at how Google PPC performs, and you don't get the level of data to really understand what's driving performance on the website. How are people interacting with the website? How do people from different regions behave differently on a website? And that's what analytics is all about. If I was to sum Google Analytics up in a sentence, it would be that Google Analytics helps you to understand how different people from different regions interact with your website, and hopefully perform actions that you deem desirable. So if you really should be using both. If you want one simple tracking solution, go with analytics. But, I recommend trying to learn both products. So on the topic of attribution, and I'm still staying with conversion tracking right now, something that's really important if you want to grow your business over time, if you really want to help your advertisers spend more on search, you're going to have a conversation with them at some point about attribution. At its simplest, what it means is that as a consumer, if I'm going to buy a car tomorrow, I'm going to do more than one search on Google, right? I'm going to probably do 5 searches, maybe 10. I'm going to begin by searching for a car, maybe a generic keyword like cheap cars in Joburg, and eventually, as I actually narrow down my purchase decision, I'll probably look for a Volkswagen City Golf. In AdWords, all of the profit or all of the kind of conversions, it gets attributed to that last particular keyword, and we disregard the value of all of the other channels. And that's not representative. That's not really giving you the full picture of how someone got from A to B, A being the beginning of the purchase journey and B being the actual purchase itself. So you want to try and help the advertisers to understand that there's a whole ecosystem of keywords that are relevant, that they need to be present on. And while some of those keywords mightn't actually be driving last click sales, they're definitely introducing people to the brand for the first time. And if you're not appearing in those keywords, you won't be part of the consideration set. So to give you a simple example, this lady, Helen we'll call her, is searching for a ski holiday. She begins by searching for flights to Zurich. She then looks at hotels Zurich, and finally she actually looks for Thompson ski holidays and makes a booking. Right now in AdWords, you're only going to see a conversion against Thompson ski holidays. But what we're trying to do is provide you with a series of reports and insights that show you that actually flights to Zurich and hotels Zurich were also really important keywords that drove this person down the funnel to actually convert. So, yeah, I guess you can think of your keyword strategy in three parts. You've got introductory keywords, which will introduce people to the brand for the first time. You've got supporting keywords that people will search for as they get into the whole kind of research phase. And then the closers, which actually results in bookings, and that tends to be brand terms. You want to kind of take this whole ecosystem of keywords into account. What we provide you with in AdWords is a product called Search Funnels, and that attempts to stitch together a customer's path to purchase. It can provide you with a lot of really cool information, things like, on average, how long does it take for somebody to actually make a purchase? And in this particular instance, you can see that 60% of all conversions came after 12 days. And I know from looking at the report, the average number of days to conversion was 25 days. Why is that important? The reason why that's important is because if you set up a new AdWords campaign for this particular advertiser, you actually can't expect to start seeing bookings and conversions for at least 25 days. So, and the client might actually get frustrated and after 2 weeks be like, this isn't working. But if you understand the funnel and if you understand the average path to conversion, you'll be able to tell them, look, we can see from the data in the account that on average people aren't purchasing until 25 days have passed, and you need to just wait it out before we make any judgments. It'll also tell you things like the average path length. How many clicks are people doing on your keywords before they convert? And it will show you a really important metric, a metric called assisted conversions. So against all of your keywords in your campaigns, it will show you whether a keyword is stronger at actually assisting in the conversion process as opposed to being the keyword that actually gets the booking. And I guess in the last 3 weeks, we've actually made this data available within the AdWords interface. So if you go to the column section, you can add in all of those types of metrics around search funnels, and it all becomes available within the interface. And in order to get all this data, you need conversion tracking set up. So a really, really rich set of reports. Grand. I'm going to leave it there for conversion tracking. We've covered a hell of a lot. We've got 20 minutes for Google Analytics. Did anyone want to ask any questions at this point? Cool. So the God particle, the Higgs boson, what is it? Essentially, the snippet of code you generate when you set up an analytics account is what I would call the Higgs boson particle. And the reason why, it basically unlocks the secrets to your website. It gives you such a rich treasure trove of data. It'll tell you information around demographics, behavior, whether someone's a new visitor or a returning visitor. What are they doing on their site? Where are they coming from? What are they searching for when they're on the site? So if you can get analytics set up to capture all this data effectively, you're going to have a wealth of information to improve the performance of your campaigns. If I'm online, I'd like to quickly show you how to actually get this snippet of code. So you can go to the analytics site and you can create a new account. I'm just going to sign into my own account very quickly. Cool. You'll basically come into an interface like this. There should be a create account button. That is weird. Yeah, okay. So what'll happen is when you set up your account, you'll automatically be in the admin tab. You'll come in here. All of these are profile names. Don't worry about them. That'll be blank. You simply go to new account. You click on new account. It's going to be for a website. The website name, in this case, is example.com. I'm going to put in the URL. You don't need to worry about this too much, about the industry category or the time zone. I'll set the time zone as South Africa. The account name is just example. And then you just click Get Tracking ID. The service level agreement comes up. Click on I accept. And there's the code. You basically just take that code. It's a piece of JavaScript, very similar to conversion tracking, and you place it on absolutely every page on your website. And that's analytics set up at its most basic level. With that particular piece of code, if you make some adjustments to it, and you need to read about this in the Help Center, but there's various modifications you can make. And by making those modifications, you can measure absolutely anything on your website. So that piece of JavaScript, in its most basic form, relies upon page loads. And every time a page loads, the JavaScript fires, and we register a page view. There's a lot of different things on your website or interactions someone can have that won't be a page load. If someone just presses a play button on a video, for example. So there's a lot of modifications we can make to the code to actually track all of that. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail now, but just bear in mind that whatever action someone can take on your website, we're able to track it through a modification of the snippet of the code that I just showed you. So with analytics, you've now placed the tracking on the site, information's getting pulled into the account. We essentially package all of the reports up into 4 very easy to digest reports. The first is the audience reports. The audience reports will tell you basically who your customer is, where are they coming from? Are you getting most of your traffic from Joburg? Are you getting most of your traffic from Cape Town? Which is higher engagement metrics? Where are all of your conversions coming from? The content reports will show you what people actually do on your website. So what are the pages that people are more likely to exit the website from? Which pages have the highest bounce rate? If you set up goal funnels or conversions, you can actually see what are the pages people visit to actually go through that process from the beginning, maybe a product details page, to actually buying the product, and where are they falling off. And all of that information can inform your usability strategy and actually inform, what parts of the sites do we need to optimize. The third set of reports are the traffic sources reports. So these will basically give you a breakdown of where all your traffic's coming from. Do I get the majority of my traffic from direct, referrals, PPC, organic, and what are the trends over time? And then the last set of reports are goals and e-commerce reports. So these are in a standalone section, but I guess what's really important about them is that when you set up goals or when you set up e-commerce, all of those reports or all of that data gets layered across all of the other reports we've just talked about. So if you set up e-commerce to track revenue and product sales, when we go into the audience report, you can see revenue by geography, or you can see revenue by traffic source. So analytics becomes much, much more meaningful when you set up goals or you set up e-commerce. The difference between goals and e-commerce is very simple. E-commerce will actually track revenue. If you have a commercial transaction that takes place on your website, then e-commerce is the solution to go with. Goals, on the other hand, are pretty much developed to help you track softer metrics if you don't have actual commercial transactions. So I guess there's a few things we measure. So the kind of goals we can set up. If a user reaches a particular URL, you can set that up as a goal, a URL destination goal. You can set up a time of site goal. So time of site would basically say, if someone's been on the site for 10 minutes, that's high engagement. We want to set that up as a goal. A pages per visit goal. So again, that's really trying to measure how engaged is my user. Again, if someone visits maybe 4 pages in any one session, you might want to register that as a goal. And then finally, we have event goals. And an event goal is simply a goal that will track when somebody interacts with say a video or something on your website which doesn't require a page load, because the JavaScript relies on page loads, but by setting up event tracking, we can track things like did somebody press play on the video, how long did they watch the video for. Maybe you want to set up an event goal around if somebody watches 2 minutes of my video, trigger that as a goal. So it's very kind of dynamic. There's nothing you can't really measure. I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of how you set up goals. So once you've got a profile set up, you can go into your particular profile. All right, give me a sec. You go to the admin section. And within the administrative section, you've got your profile name, which is Test Deco. If you drill down into it, you get to the goal section. Click on the plus goal button. As I said, there's 4 different goals you can set up. I'm just going to quickly take you through the URL destination goal. So I'm going to call the goal name a booking. It's going to be a URL destination-based goal. The goal URL will probably be something like www.example.com/thank you for booking. We're going to put it on exact match, which basically just means when somebody lands on a URL that matches the exact URL I've just put in there, then register that as a goal. I can put in a goal value. So if I want to put in a goal value of 100 Rand for every time someone sees that page, we can potentially do that. And then this is a really important section. You can set up a goal funnel. And the reason it's useful to set up a goal funnel is because it allows you to set up the 3 or 4 steps that happen before somebody actually conducts the booking. And when you do that, we're able to analyze a report called a goal flow report. And the goal flow report will show you exactly how many people drop off at various stages of the booking cycle. And based on that, you'll have a very good sense of, where are the bottlenecks in my website, what should be the areas that I focus on for usability testing. So I'm going to click on Use Funnel. And the first step in the funnel is going to be, you don't put in the actual domain at this point. You just put in the /. And I guess the first section might be Add to Cart. The second step might be, it's probably going to be something like Review Order. And then the third step is going to be payment. And then the last step is probably the thank you for booking, which we don't need to put in. And you just click on Save, and that's basically your funnel set up. Now you're going to have a whole series of reports in analytics that will show you what's happening in that funnel. Yeah, that's it really. As I said, there's 4 different types of goals that you can set up. And it's all really quite straightforward as to how to do it. So this is an example of the goal flow report. It looks very complicated. Essentially, for this particular advertiser, they have 4 steps to booking, and the red line is basically denotes the amount of people who've exited at any stage. And if you hover over it with your mouse, what it's going to give you is an actual percentage and number of people who've dropped off at that particular point in the funnel. You can get really deep into the analysis with this report because you can start to look at, things like traffic source, people coming from PPC advertising. How do they actually interact with my goal funnel versus people who are coming direct or organic, for example? I think the last area we need to briefly touch on is e-commerce reporting. If you want to set up e-commerce, you've got to, again, do a basic customization to the Google Analytics code that sits on the thank you for purchasing page of your website. E-commerce reporting is incredibly important if you do commercial transactions. So I would recommend setting it up. I'm not going to go into you're going to really need your developer or the client's developer to implement this because it's quite complicated and a lot of it will hinge on their own, basically their own URL structures and the kind of custom variables that they use. But on the developer site, which I've provided a link for, we give detailed information into how to set up e-commerce reporting. So I guess all you guys really need to know is that if you want to set it up, it requires an additional snippet of tracking code on the thank you for booking page, which you'll need to liaise with the developer of your client in order to implement it. Okay, so at this point, I just want to give you 4 examples of how I've used analytics over the last year to help my own clients. Pretty much just to try and get you excited about the possibilities, about how you can potentially use it, and hopefully just to motivate you to get it set up for your clients. I think it can also be quite a lucrative add-on that you can charge clients. I know in South Africa, I think a lot of agencies could be commanding monthly fees of anywhere between 12,000 Rand to 50,000 Rand a month for their analytics service. So it really is a lucrative business to be in. And I think it's the one product that can really truly position you as a consultant to your client if you understand the reports. So to give you an example of the kind of information that you might get, this is one of my own retail clients, and from the e-commerce reports, I can see that they drive about 36 million Rand, I think it's year to date, from direct traffic. They get 35 million Rand from organic, and they get 15 million Rand from Google CPC. And I can also see the percentages. So I see that direct drives about 38% of their revenue, Google Organic grows about 30%, and PPC is only 13%. It's really important to understand that because you're going to go in and pitch them PPC, but you really need to understand the overall context, And in the case of this particular client, I can tell you that, one of their strategies for the year was to try to do an element of above-the-line advertising, to invest in radio, to invest in television. And the premise behind that was that they were hoping to actually get customers to go directly to their website or to search for their brand. And ultimately, that would bring down their reliance on PPC advertising. And if you look at the trends over time, you can see they actually managed to achieve that in both kind of October, November, December, the most important period of the year for retail. They got a significant bump up in organic and direct visits. Now, I can't do my job very well if I don't understand, number one, what the client's trying to do, and number two, if it's working. And the only way I can do that is from coming into analytics and diving into this. It gives you so much more context around your pitches, and it really does help to position you as an expert. So that's the first thing, really being a consultant to your client. The second thing is that, Adwords, will measure conversions. But it's very hard to understand from an AdWords perspective. What are the margins? Should we be pushing more aggressively? I think analytics does a much better job at that. When you've set up e-commerce conversion tracking or e-commerce in Google Analytics, it's very easy to do a breakdown of performance by product category for your advertisers. So on this particular graph, the top one, I was able to show this retailer that over the course of the year, this is how much revenue you're driving, the blue bar graph, across all of these categories. And this is your ROI, which is the actual red line. And that's for the whole year. So we could see that, for example, games drives an ROI of 283%, and decent enough revenue. Now, if I know that, and if I go back into the AdWords account and I see that that the impression share metrics on the game campaigns are really low, I know there's a lot more volume left on the table, that there's a lot more scope there to be more aggressive. And I can start to look at these reports and I can say to my advertiser, I think you should pull back spend on this category, and I think you need to reinvest it in this one. Because a lot of AdWords is about investing in what works and investing in the high margin products. The second trend the second graph is basically over time. What's the trend in overall ROI from AdWords? And you can see the trend in this case is downwards. We've gone from an ROI of 5.2 in January right down to 1.7 or something later in the year. You really need to understand what's driving that trend. If you want to have a good conversation with the client. I can tell you in this instance, the main drivers of that trend were that, number one, they stopped bidding on their own brand term. And number two, they started to roll out new categories that they'd never competed on before as the year went on. And when you start competing on a new category for the first time, it takes money, or you've got to spend money to make money, and it's true with AdWords. So the kind of costs of trying to get these categories rolled out had the impact of bringing their ROI down. But they were willing to accept that because ultimately, they're hoping in the long run that they're going to boost performance in those areas. As I mentioned, here's a graph where we married the data from analytics and from AdWords together to show a client the missed revenue opportunity. So we were able to show them that in the electronics category, this is the revenue you've driven year to date, but based on the impression share metrics in AdWords, we can tell you've missed out on about $1 million worth of revenue from electronics in the last year. And all of these are real pitches. We've used the data in analytics to go to the client with this and to upsell. I think the second last one I want to talk about is I'm being waved of 2 minutes, is troubleshooting dilemmas. So AdWords can only tell you so much. I had a client who, when I looked in analytics, I could see that they got 73% of their traffic from, or 63% of their traffic from Google, but they only got 25% of their goal completions for Google. And I couldn't understand why that was. And when I dug deeper into it, I could see the bounce rate on Google was much higher, average visit duration was much lower. It was all pointing to the fact that Google CPC wasn't doing well. And eventually, I got to the bottom of what was going on. And what I could see from the site speed reports in Google Analytics was that the vast majority of traffic on the Google campaigns was coming from Internet Explorer. And the average page load time for Internet Explorer was between 12 and 16 seconds versus 5 seconds on Chrome. And if you're in AdWords and you don't understand why is this campaign not profitable, I've set it up perfectly, you're never going to get that insight. You're never going to be able to go back to your client and go, well, actually, you need to speak to your developers because your site is performing shockingly on Internet Explorer, and that's where the majority of your traffic is coming from. And then the last example I have is multi-funnel attribution, but I'm going to spare everyone the pain because there's only 30 seconds left, and I'm going to leave it there. So yeah, look, that's analytics for you. I hope it was useful.